Right, good day and welcome to a special edition of Hello Malaysia. We'll be discussing on the ever hot topic right now. It's the 1MDB issue, and today I am very honored to have a co-host. He is Mikhail Raj Abdullah. He is the Deputy Editor in Chief of Economic Desks, and guess who's in the studio today?
I think somebody from 1MDB.
Right, somebody who is in the hot seat always. Yeah. Maybe you want to introduce our guest for today?
This is ARUL Kanda. You all know him. Let me see. He is the Group President and Group Chief Executive Officer of 1MDB.
Right.
And we are here to grill you.
Thank you, Michael.
As much as we can. Keep calm.
Okay.
So, obviously, I would like to welcome you to the show, giving some time to us, trying to explain about 1MDB and issues, surrounding 1MDB. But before we grill you, like what Mike said, we would like to know a little bit about you and maybe a little history on 1MDB.
Sure. In terms of myself, I'm Malaysian, which I think a lot of people are still not sure about. I left when I was 18 to go and study overseas.
Okay.
And I worked for 10 years in the UK, 10 years in the Middle East, and now I've balik kampung to be back home in Malaysia.
Right.
So first of all, thank you to Bernama and to the team for having me here today. In terms of 1MDB, I'm sure you will know, a lot has been said about the company, and there have been a lot of different viewpoints and opinions expressed. The fact is, 1MDB is a company that's 100% owned by the government of Malaysia, and it was set up originally as a strategic development company. And the vision behind 1MDB at that time was to act as a catalyst, to stimulate foreign direct investment, and to do things differently for the government of Malaysia.
Right. So with that, and after it has been on, setting up some things and some programs, things started to pop up, which is, an issue pertaining to 1MDB, and most of it are not to our likings, obviously. So most of it, being asked, and people are very upset because the questions that they asked were not answered, or not the kind of answers that they would like to hear. So here we are, we're trying to get all those questions to you. Maybe we'll start with Mike.
Yeah, it's all nice and dandy, but what happened along the way that it ended up in such a financial distress within about 7 years and 42 billion worth of debts,
Sure. So I think, Mike and Sue, what's important to understand is the business model and capital structure of 1MDB. When 1MDB was set up, the government decided that it should fund itself through debt, so bank loans as well as capital markets. Now, why debt? The reason behind that was first to create a discipline. So when you have debt, you have to pay interest and principal when it is due. Secondly, it frees up government funds for other purposes like schools, hospitals, roads, and so on. So the use of debt was to acquire good quality assets, primarily real estate and energy. So 1MDB today is one of the largest power producers in Malaysia. We have 13 power plants in 5 countries around the world, producing 5,500 megawatts of energy. We also have some of the biggest plots of land strategically located in the center of Kuala Lumpur.
Right.
Now, where the challenges arose were a mismatch in terms of cash flow generated from these long-term assets versus a short-term need to service interest and also some portion of the principal that came due. So if I could summarize the key challenge, it's that. It's a cash flow mismatch. Now, having assessed the problem, the government took a very clear step to implement a rationalization plan. And in summary, the rationalization plan is a solution to overcome this cash flow mismatch through selling equity in some of our assets in order to raise funds and pay down debt.
I see. Right.
But how can 1MDB continue to refer to itself as a strategic development company? Because after 6 years, it is only now focused on paying off its debts. So it doesn't gel there,
So, Mike, if you look at the projects that 1MDB is undertaking, so Tun Razak Exchange, for example, 70 acres right in the heart of Kuala Lumpur, a master plan development. If you look at Bandar Malaysia, a 486-acre new township within Kuala Lumpur. And if you look at the consolidation of 3 different IPPs under EDRA Energy. These are all strategic projects that 1MDB envisioned, and it has carried out. So where we are today is a problem that any business faces, which is this mismatch due to internal factors and also external factors. Right. So what's important though is that we have taken steps to rectify the situation, and alhamdulillah, where we are today, we have good interest in the equity that we're looking to sell, and we're making progress on that front.
But it seems to be like a long way off all these projects. I think the gestation period will be like many years to come. Where are you going to get your cash, you know? And as it is now, you all are cash trapped, and every assets that you have, you're selling off to pay off your debts. So there seems to be more than a mismatch, you know.
Sure. So in terms of energy, all our power plants are up and running. Yes. So we purchased existing operating power plants, and the cash flow from EDRA Energy is close to 5 billion ringgit per annum of income or revenue generated from those plants. So that's ongoing. Now, on the other hand, we have land. I'm proud to tell you that this year itself, 1MDB has sold about 1.3 billion ringgit of land in TRX. So we are the master developer. We are spending close to 3 billion ringgit on infrastructure. We have now divided the land plots, and we have successfully sold those land plots. Who are the
buyers for the 1.3 billion land?
So in terms of the investors in particular, we have sold a major plot of land to Mulia Group, one of the largest property developers in Indonesia. We have sold a plot to Affin Bank, to Lembaga Tabung Haji. And in terms of a bigger joint venture, we have recently, in March this year, entered into a joint venture with Lendlease, which is one of the largest property companies in the world, to develop a 17-acre plot of land in TRX. So this will have a 2 million square foot mall. It will have a number of residential and also hotel towers.
Right. And I think, when you mentioned there's a mismatched internally and also externally, I think what people want to know, what happened internally that made this problem such a big thing. And I think it affects the people as well because, of course, our money is in jeopardy as well. So what do you say about that?
Sure. So a couple of things there. I think in terms of direct equity from the government, it was 1 million ringgit. And of course, earlier this year, as part of the rationalization plan, 1MDB borrowed, so it's a loan, 950 million ringgit from the government. Now, separately, the government has also provided certain guarantees on our debt. But it's important to understand, if you look at the guarantees, it's 5.8 billion ringgit, and then letter of support on some other debt, which total of 1 trillion ringgit, that's just under 2%. In the context of government debt as a whole, for about 630 billion ringgit, it's about 3%. So whilst the numbers are large, they are manageable. And through the rationalization plan, we are in the process now of selling equity in EDRA, our energy company, as well as seeking development partners to buy equity in Bandar Malaysia. And we have a debt for asset swap with IPIC, who has guaranteed some of our debt. So the sum total of these three transactions can result in up to 42 billion ringgit of 1MDB's debt being reduced and or repaid over time.
I find it a little bit hard to accept because as far as your power assets are concerned, can you get a good price for the power assets? Because some of the PPAs are expiring soon, and even TNB, one of the bidders, the market says that they should not pay more than 8 billion, you see. So, and the other bidders are the foreign bidders, are they serious bidders and all that. So, which is why I have doubts that you all can raise up so much money to pay your debts as $42 billion.
So, Mike, if you talk to me at the end of the month, I think by then we will be able to reveal to you the outcome of our sale process for EDRA. What I can say to you is we had 11 interested parties that expressed their desire to purchase equity in EDRA. We narrowed that down to 4 shortlisted parties, and from those 4 parties, 3 bidders have submitted final and binding proposals. So TNB is one of them, and 2 others are foreign entities. Now, in terms of our plan in relation to EDRA, we expect debt reduction, so a mixture of the equity that we will get from the sale of the asset, plus the debt that will move off our balance sheet once we sell the asset, of between 16 to 18 billion ringgit. So that's quite material.
Okay.
Now, if you look at Bandar Malaysia, the value of the land at about 500 ringgit per square foot is about 11.5 billion ringgit. So that too is quite material value of land.
That means by the time you sell the assets, I mean the sale will be like 16 to 18 billion, or the power assets are worth slightly less and combined with the other TRX and all that.
So just on power, just on power, our debt reduction target between debt transfer and equity we will receive is between 16 to 18 billion.
I see.
So that shows you the value of those assets, and it's proven now by the bids that we have received as part of the sale process.
And what kind of period do you have to be able to resolve those debts, from this sale of power assets and all that?
So in terms of time frame, the bulk of our assets are actually long-term assets. So in terms of our debt, over 80% of our debt is long-term in nature.
Okay.
So the short-term debt portion can be managed through receipt of proceeds from the sale of EDRA, for example.
Right.
As well as when we get in development partners for Bandar Malaysia, the idea is the purchase of equity in Bandar Malaysia will generate cash for us to pay down and manage our debt. So we are very confident that by the end of 2015, we would have signed 3 agreements. So the first is for the sale of EDRA. Secondly, for the sale of equity to development partners for Bandar Malaysia. And thirdly, the debt for asset swap with IPIC. Now, of course, the cash will come in over time as we sell, but in terms of legally binding agreements, that's our target to complete it by the end of the year.
EDRA can be sold to foreign parties, right?
So the restrictions today in Malaysia are a policy determination by the government that foreign bidders can only own up to 49% of local or domestic power plants. But remember, we also have foreign assets within EDRA, so we have power plants overseas, and the discussions with the bidders are on an overall basis.
I see. Okay. Talk to us about more of your plan on TRX, the growth potential of TRX.
Sure. So, Michael, TRX is a very exciting development. I think if you look at KLCC, KL Central and Mid Valley, these are 3 examples of what TRX could be like when it is fully completed. So in terms of the first phase of TRX, we expect that to be done by 2018. And as I mentioned earlier, we've had some world-class property companies purchasing land or partnering with us to develop TRX. TRX has 2 MRT lines, MRT Line 1 and Line 2, the largest MRT station in KL. It is, of course, along Jalan Tun Razak, where we are undertaking significant improvement works to facilitate better traffic. We also have direct connections from TRX to the MEX highway and to the Smart Tunnel. So as a location of where to be placed,
it's very strategic.
It's extremely strategic. And on top of that, the government has provided certain tax incentives to financial services companies who locate in TRX. So our view is that TRX will become the international financial district for Kuala Lumpur.
Right. Okay, we need to go. We'll save that question, Mike, but because we need to go for a commercial break. So stay tuned to this special edition of Hello Malaysia on 1MDB. And welcome back to a special edition of Hello Malaysia. We are discussing on 1MDB, and together with me, my co-host Michael Raj, the Deputy Editor-in-Chief from the Economic Desk, and our honourable guest, Mr. ARUL KANDA, the President and Group Executive Director of 1MDB. And before we went for a break, we were discussing a little bit on what MDB is all about, you know, things that they do, and about the issues surrounding 1MDB and the solutions that came out with all the debts that they have. And before we went for a break also, Michael wanted to ask a question, but we need to go for a break. So Michael, you can continue with the question.
No, because the perception is that it's difficult sometimes not to conclude that you have been brought in to clean up the mess created by others.
Yes.
Okay, that sometimes they say that you are a fall guy, that you are covering up for someone else,
Right.
covering up something and all that. So the question is this assumption true?
True.
And how did 1MDB get into such a mess, you know?
Yes.
So first of all, Michael, there is absolutely no cover-up in relation to 1MDB. And even if there were attempts to do so, it's impossible. I don't know if you know, but we have 5 investigative agencies looking at 1MDB from Bank Negara, Auditor General Department, PDRM, the MACC, and also the Public Accounts Committee. So all these agencies have been given information about the company. We have extended the fullest cooperation in order to establish from an independent third-party perspective what happened in 1MDB. So those investigations are ongoing, and we are cooperating fully with the lawful authorities.
Right.
Now, in relation to the company, if you take a few steps back, the objective of 1MDB, especially in energy and real estate, was very clear. From an energy perspective, it was to purchase, on behalf of the government, 3 different power companies that were previously owned by individuals or corporations linked to earlier administrations. So the original IPPs. So the government had a view or vision to consolidate these companies and to use that as a platform to hopefully rationalize energy tariffs in the future. As for real estate, the objective was for the government to act as a master planner and then sell down plots of land in these strategic parcels so that the benefit of that sale can come back to the government via 1MDB, which is a 100% government-owned company. So what changed, or what challenges that faced the company over time can really, if you ask me to identify a particular point, would be the delay in an IPO of the energy business. So as you know, 1MDB has funded itself through debt, and that debt was used to purchase the energy business and also plots of land. Now, an IPO was supposed to happen initially in November 2013, and then the second attempt was in November 2014. We discussed earlier how there were many brickbats about the company, about the actions of the company, so much so that undertaking an IPO became very difficult. Now, that was the turning point at which the need to service interest and principal on a short-term basis caught up with the cash flow or lack of cash flow of the company.
Right. And when were you given the opportunity to lead the team, the first thing you do, obviously you went on research on 1MDB. So what did you find out? And obviously you've heard about things going on around 1MDB. So what was the first thing that came into your mind, and what was the thing that you should be doing if you were given this opportunity?
So you mentioned the team. I have to say I'm very pleased and honored to be working with some top-notch professionals. So Dato' Azma, who runs our real estate business, formerly from PNB, over 20 years of experience in real estate development. Dato' Nazri, who runs our CEO of our energy business, one of the top 5 people in Tenaga Nasional previously, and now running. So from a day-to-day perspective, I can assure you the operations of the company are going on, and we are generating electricity and undertaking massive real estate developments in TRX as well as in Bandar Malaysia. Now, in terms of the position of the holding company, which is 1MDB, the reality is we are today at a crossroads. So in a situation where there is a need to service debt and there is a need to invest in the businesses, so whether on the energy business or the real estate business, this requires additional capital. And given the scenarios or the challenges that we are facing today, having discussed with our shareholder, the Ministry of Finance, we concluded through what is now known as the rationalization plan that the best option would be to dispose of assets or bring in new investors, in the case of Bandar Malaysia, in order to pay down debt to bring it to a sustainable level such that it can be serviced through the cash flows and or sale of assets by the business. So that's where we are today. And we need to be given the opportunity to implement this plan in order for the company not to have to go back to the government for additional support.
Right. And when you took over the position, did you feel that it was possible to turn around the company?
So again, Sue, I think, in a situation where a rationalization is required, and I've got a background in debt restructuring and rationalization, you only have really three options. So the first is to get more equity from the shareholder. The second is to sell assets and pay off the debt. And the third is to bring in equity from third parties. So we have decided to use option 2 and 3, which is to dispose of certain assets and also to invite new capital in, for example, in the case of Bandar Malaysia, to develop the assets.
Okay.
You know, talk about your debts, but let me touch on this transparency. For 5 years, we never really heard anything about 1MDB except for the CSR. And suddenly you are issuing 2 statements almost every day, you know. So the question is, what is your view that being a company owned by the MOF warrants non-disclosure of remuneration, and this is contrary to international standards, whereby there is an expectation of a higher level of transparency being linked to the MOF?
Sure. So, Mike, I think first of all what's important is to emphasize that 1MDB's financials are publicly available.
Okay.
So if you go to the SSM website or Companies Commission website, you can download our accounts, and the notes to the accounts are extremely detailed. I think very few companies in Malaysia, including public listed companies, have that level of disclosure in the notes to the accounts. Now, in terms of other aspects of the business, you can't detach the fact that 1MDB is a government-owned company. So we acknowledge that fact, and especially since I've come on board, we have made a lot of efforts to provide further information, to provide details through press releases, as well as interviews. I think you're aware that in the last few months I've spoken to TV3, to NST, Reuters, Financial Times, BBC, and of course yourselves. So this represents a continuous effort on our part to share information to the public, including, for example, through publication of a booklet by JASA, Jabatan Hal Ehwal Khas of the government, which provides a detailed Q&A as well as graphical and tabular information about 1MDB. So it is our hope that through this continuous engagement, more information will be shared, and the facts will be laid out on the table in order for opinions to be formed.
Right. What about, things that's happening on the online, on the social media, where you have this kind of documents and that kind of documents coming out saying this is happening, that's happening. So how would we know? Probably we are saying government is trying to cover up something. So who's saying what and who's saying the truth?
Yeah, and the documents are so believable.
Yes.
And some of the board meetings, minutes of board meetings,
Right.
and all, so it's very difficult to
deny
just,
it.
deny them.
Sure.
Right.
I think what's important, Sue and Mike, is context. Now, it is very easy to take an excerpt or a section from a document and then build a story about that so-called extract without reference to the full set of documents or subsequent documents and so on. So context is very important. This is why the government of Malaysia, through a cabinet decision in March, on the 4th of March, the cabinet asked the Auditor General Department to conduct a thorough review of 1MDB's financials and operations.
Right.
The Auditor General presented a very detailed interim report to the Public Accounts Committee in July, and they have committed to complete their final report by the end of the year. So, in my view, it is better that the lawful authorities undertake this review and share with the public at the appropriate time the findings and the outcome. Remember, the PAC is a bipartisan committee of parliament. That means there are opposition and government MPs.
Right.
So I take you back to my earlier statement. There cannot be a cover-up, because the facts will be presented and the appropriate judgments need to be formed accordingly.
Right, and there's also this confusing statement. Let me just give you a confusing statement about the regarding the funds that supposedly parked in Singapore and then which later turned into units, and finally it was said it was not even there in Singapore. So how do you come about with that?
Sure, good question, Sue.
Yeah.
I think if you look back into our accounts and the notes to our accounts, it is very clear that from September 2012, 1MDB, having originally made investments in PetroSaudi, equity and loan investments in PetroSaudi, over time converted those investments into fund units, which have been there or in fund unit form since September 2012. So it's always been fund units.
Okay.
What happened in 2014 is that 1MDB redeemed these fund units. Those redemptions happened in two ways. One was a redemption in cash, so through a sale of the underlying assets by the fund manager, the fund manager returning money back to the company. The second way in which a portion of the units were monetized was through a sale of the units themselves. So redemption happened in two ways, one in cash and second by way of sale of fund units.
Right.
Now we have issued a very detailed explanation on this matter, describing clearly how much in cash and how much by way of fund units.
Can you define what are fund units, I thought they were bonds or unit trust, but you're talking fund units. I never heard of that term before.
Yes. So, if you have say a unit trust investment, what you have is a unit, and that unit represents an ownership of various underlying assets. So we have ownership of a fund, which is represented through these units, which summarize the underlying investments. Now, from our side, these fund units were worth $2.33 billion on the 31st of March 2014. 1MDB has redeemed approximately $1.4 billion of that in cash, and that cash has been utilized for various purposes. So we're left with $940 million.
That's the one in Singapore, is it? That's the one in Singapore?
So the fund is a Cayman registered fund, but we had a custodian bank called BSI that was based in Singapore. So a custodian is your interface between the owner and the fund manager. So it doesn't mean that the funds were there.
Right.
Rather, it is the interface that we had with the bank as our custodian.
Right. So there's no problem of redeeming the remainder of the fund units to bring it back to Malaysia.
So what we have explained publicly is that having redeemed $1.4 billion in cash, we now have $940 million of fund units. As part of the rationalization plan approved by Cabinet on the 29th of May 2015, we are going to do a debt for asset swap with IPIC of Abu Dhabi. So IPIC has guaranteed a certain debt of 1MDB, about $3.5 billion of principal and another $1.5 billion of interest. So we will exchange this debt for assets belonging to 1MDB, comprising our US dollar cash deposits that you can see from the accounts of 1MDB, as well as these fund units. So that's the debt for asset swap with IPIC. That should reduce our debt by about 16 billion ringgit.
Right. Okay, we need to go for a commercial break, Mike and ARUL. And if you are still interested with 1MDB and to know more about 1MDB, stay tuned to Hello Malaysia on Bernama TV. Right, and welcome back to a special edition of Hello Malaysia. We are discussing on 1MDB with my co-host Mikhail Raj Abdullah, and of course we have the President and Group Executive Director of 1MDB. We have ARUL KANDA, and before we went for a break, we were getting into some of the issues surrounding 1MDB, and now we would like to continue with that issue. We'll start with Michael.
ARUL, the controversial question that everybody is asking is, where did the 42 billion ringgit go? Did it go into anybody's pocket?
So, Mike, again, no. The money has been fully accounted for through the various financial statements that audited financial statements that 1MDB has issued. In fact, in June this year, we published in a tabular format or graphical format exactly where the funds were utilized. So that was a mixture of financial costs, investments in the various funds, purchase of the energy assets, as well as purchase of land. So every cent of the company's debt has been accounted for and can be verified through a review of our financial statements.
What about all these gossips about, it's not there, it's not all there, someone has gotten into some of the pockets, so where all these things started?
So again, I think from my perspective, I can deal in facts and figures. To the extent that there are other parties or third parties making these allegations, then they need to submit all requisite evidence and proof to the lawful authorities.
Okay.
As we discussed earlier, there are 5 investigative authorities looking at 1MDB.
Right.
And to the extent there is proof or evidence, then those parties should submit that to the lawful authorities.
And from your opinion or from your knowledge, have they ever submitted any reports against the reports that you gave?
Again, I think there are public press statements on police reports being lodged against 1MDB, reports lodged with the MACC, for example, and so on. From our side, we are cooperating fully with all these authorities by submitting requisite information.
Right.
What I can conclusively say is that our accounts are very clear. We are able to show where the funds have gone in relation to the operations of the company.
Right. And what about the issues about, this falsifying bank statements to the PAC? What about that?
Again, I'm not aware of that exact argument.
Okay.
What I can say is, as I told you previously, 1MDB's financial statements are public documents, and as far as we are concerned, we have only submitted one set of financial statements to the SSM.
I see.
So 42 billion by January, can we have a different figure, of a lower figure? Okay? And then how much are you paying monthly to service your debts?
Right. So in terms of the rationalization plan, the objective, as I said earlier, is to substantially reduce the debt of the company. So if you look at the IPIC transaction, that should reduce our debt by 16 billion ringgit.
Okay.
And from a sale of EDRA, we aim to reduce debt between 16 to 18 billion ringgit. So that's 32 billion ringgit reduction in our debt. Now, in relation to Bandar Malaysia, we discussed some numbers earlier, that the value of the company is probably about 10 to 11 billion ringgit. So depending on how much we sell, we will reduce debt by that amount. So however you look at it, the rationalization plan will substantially reduce the debt of the company.
A time frame of?
Now, we hope to execute all those agreements by the end of this year.
Okay.
And then hopefully for the money to then come in very soon after. In terms of our interest burden, I think you asked a question on that earlier. We have, in terms of the last financial year, spent 2.4 billion ringgit on interest service. And I think that shows you the extent of the financial liability on the company, which is why we need to have a fundamental solution to fix the problem.
Okay. But let's talk about default risks. You defaulted twice on debt payments.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not true, Michael. 1MDB has never defaulted on any of its debt.
Okay.
I beg to differ. I think you defaulted because that's why there's a lot of controversy on your ability to pay up and things like that. This was about a few months ago.
Again,
No.
please show me where we have defaulted.
Right.
1MDB has always met our debt payments. Now, of course, we are constantly in discussions with our lenders and our debt holders on managing the payment profiles. But we have publicly announced this year a number of major debt repayments. For example, in February, we repaid 2 billion ringgit to a consortium of banks.
6 banks, is it?
Five banks.
Okay.
We paid a 600 million ringgit loan to one bank. And of course, in June, we paid a 975 million US, so that's about 3.6 billion ringgit loan to a consortium of foreign banks. So this is evidence of debt repayment by 1MDB. And of course, as we spoke about earlier, we've constantly met all the interest payments that have come due.
What is the next payment due for coupons or bonds?
So the next payment will be in November. We have a coupon payment for the 5 billion ringgit sukuk that 1MDB issued in 2009.
Okay.
So that's about 145 million ringgit approximately.
And the investors were?
Primarily domestic investors,
Domestic, okay.
because it was a ringgit sukuk.
Okay.
Okay, so
more of it. There's widespread criticism that investments of government-owned companies, are investing in 1MDB. You're talking about Tabung Haji, you're talking about KWAP, EPF, and even TNB is, you can consider it a government entity. So they say that it's all a bailout, rather than going to the market and getting foreign buys, it's all a bailout. What's your take on this?
Sure. So, Michael, first of all, when you look at Tabung Haji, they purchased a plot of land. So that land is now theirs in a very vibrant and dynamic development called TRX. And we are very confident that they will be able to develop and or sell that land as they deem fit. In terms of KWAP, EPF and so on, they have purchased bonds and or loans of the power companies, issued by the power companies. So these bonds are secured on the assets of the power plants and have cash flows from the PPAs, the power purchase agreements, assigned to them for repayment. So in my view, the ability to service those debts are quite secure and quite strong. Now, in terms of your third point, first of all, Tenaga Nasional is only 30% owned by Khazanah, which is a government entity, and it is a publicly listed company. TNB is, by their own admission, one of the bidders in our sale of EDRA. But as we spoke about earlier, we actually had 4 shortlisted bidders, of which 3 have submitted binding and final bids. Now, we are going through the process of assessing that, and the board of 1MDB and the shareholder of 1MDB will look at the value generated, the payment terms and all the other terms and conditions before deciding. So it is not a foregone conclusion that it is going to go to one party or the other.
Right, going back to the Tabung Haji purchasing a piece of land in TRX, they said the amount that they're paying is not equivalent to the price of the land that's supposed to be. They were paying a little bit more than what they're supposed. In short, it's also a bailout.
Again, that's absolutely wrong. Okay. I think if you look at comparable land prices for that type of location, Tabung Haji in fact paid a lower price. I think you can ask any real estate valuers or market specialists who will confirm that. Now, over and above that, 1MDB has subsequently sold land in TRX at per square foot prices higher than what Tabung Haji has paid.
Okay.
So again, I would urge you to look at the transactions that we have publicly announced, which shows that overall Tabung Haji got a good deal on that plot.
Right.
Okay, ARUL, more on the economic side of it. Financial problems faced by 1MDB is said to be exerting additional pressure on the ringgit. It's already under pressure by US rates and all that, and it has rattled investor confidence. The market totally agrees with this. What are your thoughts on this? Do you agree with this, such an assumption?
So, Michael, if you look at the last 1 month and you assess the volatility in the ringgit, the ups and downs of the ringgit value, and you plot that against news about 1MDB, you will see that there is no correlation, right? I think the ringgit is influenced by oil prices, for example, by concerns about emerging markets, just like the Brazilian real, the Norwegian krona, or the New Zealand dollar. All these currencies are linked either to commodity prices or to emerging market concerns. There was also a devaluation in China, which again caused some issues. Now, that's not to say 1MDB has zero impact. I agree with you that there is some impact of the uncertainty around that, but I would also suggest that given various political uncertainty in the country, that has also influenced the value of the currency. So there are multiple factors at any point in time that determine where a currency trades, including views of traders, buying and selling inventory and so on. So to say that it's because of one company, I think is stretching the point too far.
Now, what can you say to investors to allay such concerns over the ringgit,
Right, so 2 things. Number 1, we have never defaulted on our debt. We have met principal and interest service when due. And number 2, we have a plan, which is the rationalization plan, to progressively dispose of assets or to bring in new equity in order to reduce the debt of 1MDB.
Okay.
So from that perspective, investors should take comfort that we recognize the challenges, we're open about it, and we're here to fix the situation.
Right. We need to go for another short break. And when we come back, we'll talk more with ARUL, with my co-host, Mikhail, right here on Hello Malaysia. So stay tuned. Right, and welcome back to Hello Malaysia with me, Sue, Mikhail and ARUL. We are discussing on 1MDB and we are almost to the end of the program, and we would like to put in a few more questions to you. We'll start with Mikhail.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, ARUL, the Conference of Rulers issued a statement demanding that the leadership resolve the 1MDB crisis as soon as possible. This is unprecedented. So what do you have to say as Group President and Chief Executive of 1MDB to the rulers?
So from the perspective of 1MDB and of course the government of Malaysia, we take very seriously and respect the opinions and the views expressed by all parties, the Rakyat, the government, the opposition, as well as the ruling or the rulers of the country. So the government has shown its firm and committed approach to 1MDB through the rationalization plan, and I hope in the course of today's discussion it would become clear what our objective is, which is to dispose of assets or sell equity in order to reduce the debts of the company. These efforts are ongoing as we speak, and we hope to have a resolution by the end of the year, as promised by the Prime Minister in June 2015.
Right.
There's this saying goes, there is no smoke without fire, right? So there's allegations of financial irregularities by 1MDB, by Tun Dr. Mahathir, the opposition and the foreign media and the local media. Are they all totally wrong?
So again, Michael, the position that I would say is we need to deal in facts and we need to deal in figures. Each time certain allegations have been made, the company has issued statements. You're welcome to check our website to give a very clear picture about the facts. Opinions, of course, are another issue. Now, Tun Mahathir himself has recently been quoted on video as saying that he did not have enough evidence to lodge a police report against the Prime Minister. So, in my view, we need to base ourselves on facts. We cannot rely on hearsay, allegations and other unsubstantiated statements without due evidence and due proof.
I have to ask you this, business tycoon Joe Low, was he in any way connected to 1MDB, and have you met him after taking over as the CEO of 1MDB?
So it is public knowledge that Joe Low was an advisor to the TIA, Terengganu Investment Authority, prior to the shares being transferred to the government of Malaysia and the name change to 1MDB. Now, he actually resigned in mid-May 2009 before TIA was, the shares in TIA were bought by the government and the name was changed to 1MDB. From 1MDB's perspective, Mr. Joe Low has never been paid by the company, he's never been hired by the company, and the operations of the company are run by the management and the board of 1MDB with oversight from the shareholder, which is the Ministry of Finance.
And you're dealing with all these companies and subsidiaries and principals overseas. Are any of those companies owned by Joe Low?
As far as we are aware, no. So our interactions are with our legal counterparts, and whether they have other business interests is something outside of our knowledge.
Okay. Right. Strategically, where would you see 1MDB probably in 3 years' time?
So the original idea of 1MDB, which was to be a catalyst and to act as a strategic development company, in my view, has been achieved through those various examples we discussed, which is consolidation of the power industry, development of Bandar Malaysia, and also TRX. Now, going forward, given the challenges that the company has faced, we have had to take decisions in order to rationalize and change some aspects of the business model.
Right.
So what we are focused on at the moment is in achieving the objectives of the rationalization plan. I think in terms of what happens next to the company, that is something which I'm in constant discussion with our shareholder.
Right.
And once we get through this phase, I'm sure there will be further announcements on what happens next.
Right.
When are you going to submit your accounts? your excuse was that you're under investigation and they took the papers and things like that. Don't you have copies to complete the accounts?
So to complete accounts, you require original documents for the auditors to cite.
Okay.
Our original documents were substantially all taken away in the PDRM raid on the 8th of July 2015. So accordingly, we have obtained an extension, a legal extension from the CCM, Companies Commission, to submit our accounts by 31st of March 2016.
Right. And on...
Yeah, which means that you're waiting for the papers to be sent back to 1MDB to complete the accounts. Until then, you can't do it.
That's correct. In terms of the original documents, for auditors to review and audit to confirm the accuracy
of
these
investigations sort of stretch to like 1 year, more than March 31st. What then?
So I think, Michael, we'll have to deal with it one step at a time.
Okay.
Of course, for our energy subsidiary and our real estate subsidiary, the accounts are almost finalized, they're almost ready. The issue is at the holding company level, where our documents were taken away. So we will deal with it one step at a time. Let's see if, as and when the authorities return the documents for the holding company accounts, and we can then action it accordingly.
Okay.
There's this one question I have to ask you, that this controversy about the money and donation going into the Prime Minister's account, in any way is 1MDB involved in such an allegation?
Absolutely not. And in fact, the MACC, Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, has publicly stated that funds did not go from 1MDB to the Prime Minister's account. The MACC has also publicly stated that it is not investigating 1MDB.
Right. Okay, we are almost to the end of the program. I will give the floor to you, ARUL. What would you like to say to us, to the people of Malaysia on 1MDB?
So what I would like to summarize, in fact, is that the idea behind 1MDB was a good one, and it has achieved a lot of its strategic objectives. Unfortunately, there were a number of challenges along the way, which has resulted in the need to change the plan, which is now being implemented through the rationalization plan. So we need to be given an opportunity to implement the plan to ensure we meet our debt service obligations, to reduce the level of debt, whilst, of course, working with the lawful authorities of the country to provide them with information as part of their investigations. So I would urge that the public gives us this space in order to maximize the asset values so that we do not have to go back to the government in order to implement our plans.
Right. Once they signed the agreement and things like that, can you by next year tell us when will all the debts be serviced?
So that's my hope, to be able to provide an update once we decide how much of each asset to sell and what the proceeds will come in. We will definitely issue an update, perhaps end of the year or early next year, on where we go next.
Okay, right. Thank you so much, ARUL, for being with us, and thank you so much, Mika, for being my co-host for today, and thank you so much for tuning in to Hello Malaysia. Until we meet again real soon, I'm Sreti Sanusi. Goodbye.